everybody listening. This is I'm here with Wycliffe Gordon tonight. Wycliffe, thank you so much for making some time to speak with me a little bit. And so I wanted to
My pleasure.
what's that?
No, I said it's my pleasure. Thanks
Oh,
for having.
oh, absolutely. So Wycliffe, you're originally from Georgia. Can you kind of talk about your beginnings, especially in music? I mean, I know your father was a big influence, and I think there was sort of a famous record collection you came across when you were a kid too.
Yes. Well, my introduction to music was through my father, who's the musician in the family. He studied and played classical piano music, and when he performed, I was born in Waynesboro, Georgia, which is affectionately known as the country. I live in Augusta, so if you live in Waynesboro, um, compared to Augusta's the country. If you live in Atlanta, Augusta's country, and if you live in New York, maybe Atlanta's. You know, and that's just kind of how we view things. But being born in Waynesboro, Georgia, my father, he had an upright grand piano, and he had a reel-to-reel recorder and speakers wide in every room. They played classical piano music. So we heard everything from Beethoven, Mozart, Schumann, Schubert, that kind of thing in the house. But he also played in churches, so we heard gospel music. He played hymns and spirituals, and that was our introduction to music from our household. And on the radio, you may hear some country music, but for the most part, we heard classical and gospel music until I was a teenager. And when I was 5, 6 years old, my dad tried to get us, me and my older brother Lucius, to take piano lessons, and it was hard to sit down to the piano, go do 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 do, and right outside the door you hear like, "Hey, throw the ball!" So all the kids outside playing. That's what we wanted to do. So he didn't make that. He didn't make us do that.
But you did wind
So
up playing.
then,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
well, later on, I did wind up playing piano. Took piano lessons at age 11. And my brother, who's a year older than I, he was, by the time he turned 13, went to junior high school. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry, my relatives that have come over.
That's all right, man.
Food. So, no, it's okay. We would do, he joined the junior high. He went to junior high school. And during that time, you had to have a PE course. And you could take up to 3 lectures. So the long and short of it is my brother wanted to join the band. And he wanted to play trumpet like all the other boys, but the band director suggested he play trombone. So my parents got him a trombone. I come home from school one day, being a year apart. I wanted what he had. He had a dump truck. I wanted one. Bubble gum. I wanted some, ice cream. So I begged my parents for a trombone, and eventually they led to me getting a trombone. And then my next year, I went to junior high school with him, 8th and 9th grade. And that's when my love affair with the trombone came in. By the time, somewhere during at age 13, I had a great aunt to pass. And amongst the things that were given to the family was a 5-record collection set of jazz music that it was called the Anthology of Jazz. I think put out by Columbia. It was everything from early slave chants to the modern jazz of that time, which was everything from like Sonny Rollins Quartet playing Sonny Moon for 2, or the Count Basie Big Band playing 1 bass hit or 2 bass hit. But of all of that music, I really fell in love with music from New Orleans, and particularly one song by Louis Armstrong, the Hot Fives and Sevens, called the Keyhole Blues. And I just wore, the record out. I would just listen to that and listen to that. And, there was another group that played a song called When the Saints Go Marching In. And I started to copy that solo, I imitate what he played. And it's a form transcription, but I didn't know anything about those hip jazz terms at that time. I said, I'm copying what he's doing.
Right.
And at the end of my, 8th grade year, played a concert, and I made a bet with another guy in the band. We play half a written solo and then make up the rest, improvise the rest. And it was, somewhat successful. And, I just remember that feeling at age 13. I said, I think I want to do this. And, being a young boy, I wanted to play sports. I was in the Muhammad Ali who boxed, but I love football. But I also love music. But music stuck, and here I am.
Yeah. So does that mean Jack Teagarden was really the first trombone player you ever really heard a lot of?
It was actually on that recording. It wasn't Jack Teagarden, but Jack Teagarden was one of the earliest trombone players I heard. I got into Louis Armstrong Hot Fives and Sevens, and then the All Stars. And Jack Teagarden was one of the early All Star groups. But I heard more Trummy Young than Jack. But I later fell in love with Jack Teagarden, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And so outside of those couple guys, who would you say your strongest influences were when you were young, and maybe even now? Like, has that changed a little bit? I think that probably changes for all of us.
By none, my biggest influence is Louis Armstrong. All the trombone players that work with him, like I can't even think of the name now. I said Trummy, Jack Teagarden, and also I listen to guys that played with Duke. I see his face right now, but they played with the All Stars later on. But the influence came from Louis Armstrong's leadership, his ability to play melody, and how he would interpret melodies, also how he would improvise, and also how he would sing. And even though I didn't know it then, is what I do now, and I teach that that the instrument is an extension of your voice. You heard band directors and music teachers say that all the time, but little did I know that when I listened to Louis Armstrong, that was one of the greatest examples of that. So I listen to many trombone players, but if you ask me my greatest influence, I just have to say by none, Louis Armstrong. The schools of trombone, JJ, the many schools of the plunger, the early style trombone, Vic Dickinson and Dickie Rose, I love them all. Through Bill Waters and Carl Fontana, and but if I had to pick one musician, Louis Armstrong.
It'd be Louis Armstrong. Is it where? Who would you say influenced? Because you have such a unique plunger technique. Who would you say influenced that the most? Would you say that's Louis Armstrong too, or a combination of some people?
Well, no, I listened to a lot of plunger players on trombone and trumpet. One of the first solos I learned was Bubba Miley on the Duke Ellington recording, trumpet player, Black and Tan Fantasy. That was one of the first solos that I learned. Then I began to listen to the plunger techniques of trombone players like Tricky Sam Natton. Tricky Sam Natton on the Duke Ellington recording. It's like there was a compilation put out called the Blanton Webster Years, and it's Duke Ellington recordings between 1938 and 41. But again, there's many different plunger schools. I got a chance to meet and play, and then the band with Al Gray. Just, he didn't teach me to plunge and say, Wycliffe, do this. I just sat there and I listened to him. I was like, wow. And he played what you call open plunger, which is a lot. He played open plunger without the pixie mute. But I learned a lot from Al Gray, Quentin Butter Jackson, the guys that played with Duke, Tricky Sam Natton, and Tyree Glenn. That's what I was trying to think of earlier. He was a great master of the plunger mute, but just a great master of the singing trombone. He played with Louis Armstrong and most stars later. So, but yeah, who else? But dude, would you get Joe Temple? You should talk. Cootie Williams.
Yeah. Right.
Listen to Cootie Williams playing is just like, wow, it's just like fire and in your face. So from Cootie Williams with that kind of sound, Tricky and Sam Nathan had a really sweet sound, but Tyree Glenn, who just like one of the plunger tricks, we'd always go wah, 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 wah. And the first time I heard him do something, which was the antithesis of that, which is how, like, you know, when you laugh, like, like how it tapers off. He's like, down, woo, woo, ow, do, ow. So you're going, wah, it's like, ow, like, how. Oh, wow, that was neat. And trombonist Art Barron in New York played that recording for me, and I said, I never forgot that inflection. And it was something about just playing with those musicians. They didn't sit you down and say, we got to do it like this. You have to do it. If you listen, you paid attention, you would pick up on so much. Like, I got a chance to sit next to Brett Woodman. And we were in the rehearsal. He played a simple Charleston rhythm, like, you know, dotted eighth note to, a dotted quarter note to an eighth note. And I was just sitting there. It was on a break, and he did something. I said, Mr. Whitman, can you do that again? Now, I could play that all day long, but it was how he played it. I was like, wow. And in that moment, I learned something about normalization of the sound of many big bands. It wasn't the notes on the page. It was how, you know, how the inflections, like when a person's talking, if they're speaking, you know, French versus German versus Spanish, the inflection that they speak with. The written word is like the written note on the page, but how you pronounce those words. That's what I learned from, you know, those masters like Britt Woodman and Buster Cooper, who we just lost a few years ago. I mean, they were master teachers without saying words. You just listen to what they played. I was like, man, that's hipper than anything I would ever even think to play. So I just said, I want to work on that. I'm going to work on that. So,
and then it just takes listening a bunch of times and over until that's all you can hear in your head.
yeah, or just listening to you find one inflection. There's so much you can do with one inflection, and it's just like, I'm gonna master this, you know, inflection. Not, you know, I mean, just really work on it, because, you know, they've been doing that for years, and that's just, you know, their voice.
Right.
And I always tell trombonists, when you learn a solo by J.J. Johnson or Dick Dickinson or Dickie Rose, the notes are cool, but you really want to learn the solo. You want to play with the inflections that they played, how they used to slide, how they would breathe, how they would attack, how they would release. And it's just like, now you're developing vocabulary. I had a student tell me once, studying with me at Juilliard, so what do you want to work on? I want to work on this, and I want to work on that. I said, okay, I'm going to give you these transcriptions to work on. And it's always the same for most of my students. A couple by J.J. Johnson, and then a couple by another trombonist like Dickie Wells, who plays more the characteristics of the horn. I give him J.J. Johnson because he plays so clean. On a slide trombone, it sounds like he's playing a valve instrument. Right. And then if they want to get into plunger, I give them plunger transcriptions also. So this one student says to me, I don't really, he almost stopped me mid-sentence and said, I don't really want to sound like J.J. Johnson. And I just told him, I said, look, I really don't think you have that to worry about too much. You're not going to sound like J.J. Johnson. The best that you can do is to get the information, get as close as you can to what he played, so you can understand the level of technique, so that you can develop your own sound. You're not going to sound like J.J., only he can sound like him. So anyway, I think it's a funny story sometimes. I don't want to sound like JJ. Dude, you're not going to. Don't worry about that. That's not going to happen. You know, you're going to jump up. You know, you're going to jump high. Try to touch the moon. You're probably not going to touch the moon, but if you try to, you'll jump higher. You know.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, I mean, clearly, I mean, I've heard you sing before, and there's a lot of Louis Armstrong in your singing and your playing. That's very clear.
Mm-hmm.
What other singers do you try to emulate or are you drawn to?
Mm. Well, I love a lot of singers, gospel singers like Mahalia Jackson.
Hmm.
I love the dexterity and of like an Ella Fitzgerald. Sarah Vaughan, singers that can tell stories with the singing. Have a nice voice, but when someone can really deliver a lyric, that I still go back to pops because even great composers like Hoagy Carmichael, they would say, write tune and just about anything. Louis Armstrong would do it somehow, become a hit. If it wasn't one already, then his version would be a hit.
Right.
And sometimes Hoagy Carmichael would say, wow. And he would sometimes paraphrase, not like Upper Lazy River. Up a lazy river by the old mill run. That is the melody that Cody Carmichael wrote. But Pops would say, boom, up the lazy river, down by the old mill run. Doom, doom. Meet the lazy river by the noonday sun. And boom, I'm lingering in the shade of a kind old tree. Why don't you throw your troubles in me? He's saying the word, but he turned the song into, his thing. And on several of Carmichael's great, beautiful compositions, he said, he's quoted as saying, I wish that I would have written it the way that Louis Armstrong, sang it. And, he just taught us so much. But vocalists, I love Johnny Hartman.
Hmm.
Um, and, I love, jazz vocalists, but I also love some great classical vocalists and gospel also. But
Yeah.
just execution of its technique is great and one thing, but man, if you can tell a story like Billie Holiday, I mean,
Yeah.
what a voice! Or what some people say, what a not voice. Matter of fact, my high school band director, who I love very much, bless rest his soul and bless his heart. But he said, Louis Armstrong can play that trumpet, but he can sing worth nothing. I'm just quoting what he said. He couldn't sing. And what I learned from Louis Armstrong is that um, Duke Ellington said it about musicians, or about people in general. It's better to be a number one yourself than a number two someone else or somebody else. However, he said it in his book. And Louis Armstrong was the it was his voice. It's how he sang. Now, um, my band director didn't think it was the most. It wasn't Caruso but it was the voice of Louis Armstrong. And the thing that I think it did for me and for everyone, it was like, it's okay. That's your voice. The very thing that makes you unique, your voice, the way that you speak,
Yeah.
the tone, the inflections that you speak with, and the way that you sing. So, and he influenced so many vocalists, great vocalists, from Tony Bennett, Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, and I'm not saying it; they said it.
Right.
What he did for popular music. So I always go back to pop, but I have quite a few. Billy Eckstine. I love to listen to the rich voices and how they would tell a story, or even Cab Calloway, who always thought of as being funny, but just crazy.
I've
So
always,
yeah, I mean, so the many vocalists.
I've always noticed too that Armstrong had such a rhythmic complexity to him that so many other singers didn't have. You think that's part of the inflection too that people would pick up on?
Well, he was a master of rhythm. Like he knew where the time was. I mean, he was. You listen to some of those early recordings, and I mean, he had it from early on. It's like when you hear him play in the breaks. I mean, like the tune I would listen to, the Keyhole Blues. Now, a lot of younger players that I met in my years of travel would say, well, they don't want to listen to earlier forms of jazz like Louis Armstrong or because of the fidelity of the recording. I said, you're missing the lesson. Listen to what he's playing and how he's playing. He was a master of he knew where the time was. So if he went into like a double time field, ba da do 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 ding ding, oh do be do 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 do, sa da so ding ding ding, do 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 do, shop up. He going. I mean, we like to use the phrase people were ahead of their time, or maybe we were just behind in time. But the implication of a double time feel over, this here. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, boom. And I was like, wow, who was playing that way? So, and I'm sure he was influenced by others, but on recording, he was one of the first to do that, which was just really hit. And it's in all of those early recordings, without drums. But I'm like, so when it comes to time and rhythm, that's one thing that Pops had it. I mean, you can set your clock by, and a lot of those Hot 5 and Hot 7 recordings were done without drums. And it was just like, like that. But I think somebody was playing the spoons or something, but I was like, wow. And then if you really want to get to it, if you play trumpet, pick up your trumpet and go learn one of those solos. It's like, okay, you can look at it, looks real easy on the page, but and I remember Winston telling me that, because at first he wasn't really a great admirer of Louis Armstrong, because he would think he came in with Coltrane and bebop, right. And he told me, he still tells the story. His dad sent him a recording, Louis Armstrong playing Jubilee, and it wasn't much because he was used to playing. Dizzy Gillespie, real hot, hot and flashy, but hot and flashy, but yep. When he tried to play the melody, and he said by the time he got near the end of the first chorus, his chops were like, so wait a minute, this is not really what I thought it was. And coming from a trumpet player that caliber, I love to hear him tell that story, but it's just something about his music that always admired. But
yeah. Well, there's a reason we're still listening to it 100 years later, right? I mean,
yes, indeed.
That's right. Hey, so what's your process for learning tunes? How's that always work? Is that changed for you from when you started to what you do now? I mean,
it has. Learning tunes. I try to sing them. Everything for me now is about singing. Mm-hmm. I did a book I put out for Kindle called "Sing It First," but it had a long title. It was an ear training, the singing approach to ear training for jazz improvisation. So that long title became "Sing It First." Mm-hmm. If you can sing it accurately and in tune. That means that you can hear it, which means that you've internalized the melody. So now, back in the day, before I had a CD player, listen to my cassette, stop it, rewind it, and try to play on my trombone. What I teach students to do now is, because when you're thinking about chord changes, you're thinking about formulas. F minor 7 equals F, A flat, C, and E flat. So now you gotta figure that out. Yeah, I know that. Then I can play it on my horn. I know that. But when you're singing a minor 7 chord, boo doo doo ee, it sounds the same whether it's F minor 7, D minor 7, just starting on a different pitch. So if you sing it first, then now you got the music inside of you. So if I am teaching a master class and I ask someone to sing, and I say, sing whatever, I want you to repeat what I sang. And then they sing it back and then to me, and they sang, and I'll stop after 4 or 5 phrases. I said, what key are we in? People with perfect pitch may know, but most students don't know. I said, no, but you were able to sing what I sang. So then I do the same example. So now I want you to sing what I play. So then I'll play something on my trombone. Mm-mm. They go bum, they'll make the sound. And then they'll hear that sound and they'll go, they'll make the sound. And without even thinking about it, I said, see, what key am I in? What key am I in? I don't know. Now, you don't have to think about positions. You don't have to think about chord changes. You don't have to think about chord scale relationships, but you make the music. So my approach to learning tunes now is to sing it first, to learn to sing the melody. And even the same thing with improvisation. I try to teach you want to learn to improvise. Don't worry about trying to make something up. Still, they say the good musicians borrow, the great ones steal. Like Sonny Rollins, he'd be known to be at the club at the Philly Vanguard where John Coltrane was playing, leaning on the wall in the back. Yeah, he's checking him out, but he's gonna go home and practice what he heard. So yeah, that's my approach now. And of course, that does come after years of playing piano and looking at a set of chord progressions. Now I can look at chord progressions and hear what they sound like. But it comes from practice through singing, through chord progressions or chord qualities, like a major 7 chord. And I'd always check myself at the piano.
Yep.
It's B flat major 7. But anyway, singing is how I do it now. Everything's attached to singing. Improvisation, learning tunes, learning chord progressions.
But now, when you were a student, were you singing and kind of like learning forms and analyzing that a little bit, or is that kind of automatic now?
No, I wasn't that hip when I was a student. I didn't start doing this until later. So if I could do anything differently, that's what I would do. But that's what I teach to my students now, especially a lot of jazz musicians. They kind of too hip to sing, afraid of their voice. I'm like, don't be afraid to sing. It's the one thing that's going to help you with everything from breathing, phrasing, and if you can sing it accurately and in tune, that means you can internalize it. You don't have to figure out the trumpet or the trombone or the saxophone. If you can sing it, you can go back and teach yourself that. So, yeah, I started doing that well into my professional career.
Yeah, because it cuts off all the excess chatter too in your mind, right? Because you're completely consumed with that sound, and you can't do anything else.
Yes,
that's important. But so, have you ever been much of a transcriber though? Were you doing that when you were younger? Did you write it down?
Yes, I did. I did a lot of transcribing. I did most of it by ear. I wrote some things down, but I wanted to learn the language, and so I would listen again to my cassette player before I got before CDs came out.
Yeah.
I had portable cassettes, and I just rewind and listen. So, matter of fact, when I was in college, I went to Radio Shack and I bought my realistic stereo, and again, this before CDs came out, and I had my cassettes. So I started, transcribing J.J. Johnson. I even transcribed like solo Thelonious Monk, something that was easy enough for me to play on the piano. Mm-hmm. And I'd get around jazz musicians. They said, man, they thought I was hip because I was learning, transcribing things in another key. And what it was, my cheap stereo played all the cassettes up a half step. So I learned them wrong in one sense. So you learning stuff up a half step. And when I got a CD player, I'm like, oh man, this cheap stereo plays all my cassettes up a half step. I mean, it was still a good exercise, but I said, oops. I was like, I wonder why would Thelonious Monk play this in the key of E? I said, oh, well, it's really an E flat. I said, makes sense. But yeah, I would do that. I would transcribe trombone solos, sometimes piano solos. And one of my favorites was a trumpet solo I heard on a J.J. Johnson record by Matt Adderley's
Oh yeah.
crazy solo on Mysterioso. But and I learned that solo. I was so enamored by the solo. I learned it on trombone, and even playing in the upper register, and I probably catch it a little bit playing it now, but I still remember the solo, and I was just like, I'm gonna learn that solo. And then JJ played a pretty awesome solo too, but that Matt solo. So, but yeah, I did quite a bit of transcribing.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, would you say like J.J. Johnson is to jazz trombone players sort of like a model like Clifford Brown is to trumpet players in that way? Like it's
Yeah,
like clean, you know? And
yeah. That's why. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, no, it's sort of like a tech. Like this is like a nice prototype, right? In a way.
Yeah, JJ Johnson would be the standard I give every trombone student. Same J.J. Johnson solos to learn. The melody to Laura, like it's on a CD called The Trombone Master, and um, do. Solo's pretty easy to play. You catch the inflections good. That first chorus. That first chorus. It's pretty good and not high. And most of it is attainable. And then it gets to the second chorus. And then it's like, J.J. Johnson technique master, playing really fast with a clean single tongue. So JJ would kind of be the standard for, I want trombone players to learn a couple of his solos because they're just clean. And in order to properly execute it, you have to have great trombone technique, which means your slide speed and everything has to be on. And, I met JJ several times, and I said when I got a chance to be alone with him, I would not ask how he developed his single tone. We were in Bern, Switzerland, and our hotel room wasn't ready. So JJ and I went on a walk and had some coffee, and I couldn't help it. And I already heard what everyone else said. I said, sir, Mr. Johnson, I just have to ask, how do you single tongue so clean? He said, he told me the same thing he's told everyone else. I heard the legend. I said, Wycliffe, I don't really think about it. I just play. I said, he's gonna go to the grave with that secret. he's not gonna share with any of us. And I mean, if you practice, but I mean, single tongue was, it was immaculate. I mean, it can be easily, you know, construed as that he's double tonguing, but it's just a clean single tongue and, flawless technique. Some people I've even heard say it's boring, but I'm like, no, play it, learn this solo. And of course, then I deal with other players who demonstrate the other types of techniques, like you're playing the trombone, the vocal characteristics that exist simply because you're playing a slide instrument. And then, if they really want to get into like Carl Fontana and Frank Rosalino, we can go there too. And they're great, but just middle of the road standard, I say, you're going to learn these J.J. solos. If you can do this, that means you have your basic trombone technique. So anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of your technique, we were talking about just a little bit before you got on. I mean, you have a depressingly good upper register, especially when trumpet players hear you play. And you play trumpet a little bit too, right?
Yes, I do. I do.
And
I do.
so how did you develop that? I mean, did it come to you easy, or is that something you really had to work into?
I blame David Steinmeier for that. I mean, I had your regular, F. Most trombone players, if we can play up to that F, you made it on trombone. But then I met, David Steinmeier. He used to play with the airman of note. That's a G, a G. And I was playing with the Smithsonian Jazz Master Orchestra the first time they hired me, and I played lead trombone. Thought I did a great job. They called me back for the gig the next year. They put me on a second trombone. It was a tribute to JJ. And then most stock big band writing, the lead players concentrate on playing lead, and they'll put solos in the second and maybe second or third. But I didn't have a big head, but Dave Steinmeier, I heard of him. I heard him on recording, but I never met him.
Yeah.
And it didn't hit me until we were in rehearsal. I'm like, oh, I thought I nailed it last year. He stood up and played a solo. That note, that D above double high B flat was like the note he started on. And maybe the lowest note he played after that was like maybe an A, a fourth down. And I looked it up, I said, oh, maybe I should be playing bass on this gig. And I said, I heard that something before. So I asked, we had 2 or 3 days rehearsal. I said, hey, I'm sorry. How do you, and, with such ease, you just stand up and just like, and I'm talking about melodies, soft, not squeaking, beautiful trombone sound. He's sometimes at the end of the night when I've been playing hard, when instead of warming down, I practice in that register. I said, now you never hear that. After gig, you're supposed to warm down. He said, no, sometimes when I'm tired, I practice. I did that for 2 weeks, and I went from that F to, upper 6 to D that I can play loud. It's like, you just shoot the air. And so that's that D. I was in the bathroom, dressing room, the restroom where we changed. And he was walking around and he played that note. I didn't hear it. He said, I got it. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I played the highest F on the piano. I couldn't hear it. You had to be a dog to hear it. But I was like, but I believed him. And it was just like, so I credit Dave Steinmeier with giving me the inspiration not to just settle for that. And it was just, I bought, records with him on it that I would share with my students, like the Airman of Note, Bon Voyage. And it was just some it was a tribute to the trombone section. I think it was his last year there. And I heard other trombone players do it. When I saw that, I was knocked out. And I tell students that story all over the world. I was like, well, and I thank him for it. He's teaching down at the University of North Florida. Matter of fact, the last gig that I played was at University of North Florida, and he was there. I played with their big band, and I had one more, and that was on March 5th. I had one more show on March 6th in Atlanta, and everything shut down for COVID. But Dave Steinmeier, it was him. And I always like high note players, but I don't need to do all that. I'll leave that for the trumpets. Wow. And I know you think I made trumpet players, man. I'm sure he just, and then I've had a couple of situations where I played, we get to the end of a tune and trumpet player say, hey, don't play higher than me. I'm like, oh, it's about the music. Nobody knows who's playing what note. So, I call this, go ahead.
Oh, what did David Baker say when those high notes came out?
Well, David Baker knew he'd worked with Steinmeier before. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd heard him before in recording. I never worked with him before, but I was sitting next to him. And when he did that, I just said, and I watched him, I said, okay, he has a trumpet mouthpiece, but it wasn't. And even if it was a little, even if his mouthpiece was a little shallow, it's a trombone mouthpiece. And I can still play higher on my trombone than I can play trumpet, but I was just like, man, you know, a beautiful sound. And I credit him with that. He's just like, he made me go back in the shed. And after the gig, if I've been playing a hard gig, I start working on my upper registers. So if you can do it when you're tired, then when you're not tired, it's just like he did.
Yeah.
And I think the highest, and somebody asked me what was the highest note I ever played, that I remember was like a fifth above that. It was we were doing Sing, Sing, Sing with the brass band of Battle Creek and trombones on one side, and they had the screaming trumpets on the other side. And they'd say, "We want you to play a solo," but at the end of the song, we're doing all of that. You got screaming trumpets. I mean, you can't really compete with that. And I'm like, okay, I can play loud, and I go high, and then he goes up, and I was just like, I took a breath, and he played this A, they'll say B.
Yeah.
You're a trumpet player, right? It sounds
Yeah.
better and higher if you call it something else.
That's
And
right.
he
It feels
played that.
it feels better for our ego.
Yeah. So I heard it, and I was just like, and I went for it, and it came out of my horn. I was just like, and it came out pretty loud. I was just like, okay, it was a little shocking for myself. I'm like, why would I ever need to play that high? Well, you playing with a trumpet player, and I was like, it felt pretty cool. So I don't think I'm gonna do it again. I might fall out or something. But anyway, yeah, I like kind of having a high range, but I like the way that David Steinmeier makes it sing. So I'm still working on that. I can play those notes, but he plays like he's playing it's like that.
Wow. Well,
I
you're
still
high.
have that to work out.
Well, I think most people would love to have your high range. What when you go around and do clinics, because you do a lot with high schools and colleges as guest artist, right?
Mhm.
What do you see that's like the most common thing you want to fix in a big band?
Um, Compliment fixing a big band. Um, well, there's a couple of things, but one is the repertoire. A lot of big bands, they like to play things with a lot of counterpoint, and they don't realize how difficult it is to play a ballad. Like if you play a Duke Ellington ballad, like Billy Strayhorn ballad, big band version of like Isfahan. Um, because when you play slow tempos, all your weaknesses or strengths are exposed. When you're playing Thad Jones and it's like, running, you kind of hide behind some of that counterpoint and volume, but when you're like, bop, everything gets exposed. So I want to have big bands play more tunes like that, where they can work on everything from the articulation, the dynamics, swelling together. And that's something I remember when I was in the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, playing how much our trombone section, how we would work on that. Just so, and one time it's just like, eighth rush, do, do, bop, but are you going to play like an even eighth note rush or a swing eighth note? And that's where the bands really get exposed. They think the slow songs are boring. It's like, no, those are the big boy tunes. Those are the men and women tunes. And I'd want to fix that. And then swinging on a tune, like another tune, like Rockabye River. And I call these tunes by Duke Ellington, bat do did do 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 did do. A lot of bands, they can play Thad Jones, they can play the fast stuff, but we like playing with the quarter notes swinging at this tempo, up, boo do. And I remember teaching at Michigan State, and that's why I call this tune out. We were playing one of Thad's tunes. Man, it was swinging. I took over the band, and I pulled Rockabye River. I said, man, they're gonna knock this out of the park. And he started playing. I'm like, whoa, wait, the quarter note's not swinging. The eighth notes are not swinging. It's just like, and then when you've been in the Untitled Jazz Orchestra and you played that song for many years, it's like, okay, how can we fix this? So, how to swing on some of those earlier tunes, the one with, those tunes are, the technique to develop that is difficult, but for all practical purposes, they're easy to play. But making jazz swing, I didn't know how hard that was to do until we took out a tune like Rockabye River. It's eighth notes, quarter notes, and a few, some syncopation. I was like, wow, they just nailed this Thad Jones tune with all this counterpoint. But and when you've been in a band that knows how to play that, it's like, that's what I would fix. I go back to the basics, pull that music like Jack the Bear and Harlem Air Chef, and let students learn the importance of the devices that we use, that Duke and the great composers use, as like call and response, breaks, and riffs, and how to just communicate in the band. And I think that would help them even when they're playing solos, because a lot of times the soloists will stand up and they're thinking about changes. Okay, if the rhythm section is just playing, okay, so you're a quartet. When the background comes in, now that's something else in the conversation that you just blow right through it. And I do talk about these things, but I think that if the big bands go back and they play the earlier music and nail that, the other stuff is just good. Now you have the basics of playing, jazz swing music. That's what I would fix.
That's great. Usually, a lot of times you'll hear somebody say something like, "Well, I do this the rhythm section," but just the repertoire seems to be like such a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you find that with a lot of student groups you work with of any genre. Like it seems like they always want to skip over a couple of steps like that and get the basic.
Yeah.
What about speaking of learning? Can you talk about? So you were in the Wynton Marsalis septet for like 8 years, I think, right? And what would you say?
Go ahead. You're frozen. Go ahead. Say it again.
I said how long? I think you froze a little bit. You said how long were you in Wynton's septet?
I joined in 1989, and he disbanded septet in 95 to do the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra full time. So I was the seventh member from the summer of '89 to the end of '95.
Okay.
December '95, he told us mid-year that he's going to start doing the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra. He wants to, develop that. So he's going to, the septet will not tour as much anymore. But we all had a job, because we studied big band, studied every genre or decade of jazz. So we were prepared to do all of that. So
yeah. Well, what kind of things would you say you learned from Wynton? I know that's probably a big question.
Say it again.
What kind of things would you say you learned from Wynton? I know that's sort of probably a big question.
Well, Wynton taught me patience. Wynton very, 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 very extremely competitive, and everything, basketball, chess, whatever, conversation. He likes to debate. I don't like to do all of that. But he was very. He taught me to be patient. Like he was playing a solo or something one night. I said, "Man, how do you learn to play that fast? How do ideas come that fast?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you like Dizzy Gillespie for me." He said, "You just put your horn up to your face, and you go, I do, and I was like, man, that doesn't help me. But it did because Dizzy told him and he told me, and what he did was singing. It's when I started taking that approach to singing. But I wanted to learn how to develop my technique. And he was telling me about Clark technical exercise. The minor key. And so, I started doing those, but I was, it was when I was new to the band in my first year, and I'd be practicing every day. He said, "You're doing it too fast." And so what he could hear, you're a trumpet player, the range of motion is here. On trombone, it's position 1 to 7. So the notes can be the same, but if I'm jumping 4 positions, then 3, then 1, 4, then 2, unlike pressing a valve, the sound is going to change. If I don't move a slide fast enough, I'm going to get a glissando or something. So he kept saying, "You're doing it too fast." He walked by me, "You're doing it too fast." I'm like, and I don't want to hear that. I'm like, I'm not. I was rushing through it. So he taught me without beating me up over the head with it. That was one good lesson, that you have to be patient and learn things thoroughly. And to make sure that the slide is moving evenly and that all the space in between, and until I did that, he would remind me, and I go slow down. And then the next day, he just walked by. "You're doing it too fast." I'm like, man, shut up. Yeah, I would never say that. But until I actually did it slow and learned how to do it properly, he'll study something and, get it to perfection and then continue to do that. So, and he could hear that, and he also taught me in his own way, or all of us, to address our weaknesses. He had challenged the stuff he would write for us to play. Man, when in the big band doing Blood on the Fields, there was a tune, and that's like a 2 hour, 45-minute, 3 hour thing. There's one part of the song that goes, and it's all over the horn. Now, first of all, he kind of caught hell playing that on trumpet. It's on a slide trombone. I was like, "You want us to play this?" And then it was just like, yeah, he wrote it. He said, "Do the best you can." So there it was. It was like, and the way we had to play, and it was a unison for the band. And I remember a saxophone player complaining. I said, "Hey man, come pick up this trombone and play it." But we just worked and worked and worked. I mean, he'd write stuff that was challenging for him. So it was really, really, really challenging for us. And it was just like, and he would mess with you. It's just like, you really want to do it. Like, you're in the band. He wrote it. It's on the paper. Practice and learn it. And, and that's what we would do. So whenever, at the end of the night, I think I was playing trombone, tuba, and doing a little bit of singing. At the end of every night, Blood on the Fields, I felt like blood on my chops. So, but it was a great feeling. But it was just like, man. Whew. So, and that was another lesson in itself. It was an obstacle to overcome, because that's not typical. You're on the trombone. He wrote the unison through the whole band. All the saxophones, all the trumpets, and it created a hell of a sound. And it was just like, so our slides are moving like this, but we took pride in learning. And if you missed a note or two, it was like that was the whole point. So
you got a 1 in 12 chance every time, right?
Yep, that's it. So yeah, and I mean, yeah, he'd write for the Monk record. This is what Monk played on the piano. Then he write it for the horns to play. I'm like, okay, 5 fingers moving, before you have to switch positions, and then we stand around as the horn and to say, and we just took pride in learning it. So things that you have to know about trombones, like how to use your alternate positions, alternate fingers for trumpet,
Yep.
or saxophone. All of those things kind of came into play, and it's just like we stand in a circle. Winton, myself, Wes, and Todd, the 4 horns. Let's go over that line to that tune was called 4 and 1. But everybody took pride in learning the music, and it was just like gotta share it, and it wasn't a requirement, but in its own strange kind of way, it was. Because when I got in the band, I was at the bottom of the totem pole, the 7th member to join. There was no music really written for trombone, and I couldn't play as good as they. I could not execute. I said, "Oh man, I can hear it," but I didn't have my trombone technique together. So, Clark Technical Exercises, I went back and just addressed all the basics. That whole first year I was in the band, I have to get my trombone playing together. Forget jazz. I mean, not forget jazz, but I had to learn to play. I said, okay. So anyway, yeah, it was like a ride, but a good one and most memorable experience throughout that whole time I was in that band.
Yeah, and then you've recorded so many recordings on your own as a leader now in the past 20 years probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
Over 20 years. What what uh what would you say you've learned about that process that you might not have known 20 years ago? Is there any like really obvious things that you look back now and say, "Oh, if I just do this, the recording process is easier," or what am I listening for or anything like that?
Well, the recording process is the recording process. I think what I concentrated more on was the business. At what am I going to record? Oh, I'm going to record the songs I like. No, you have to think about. It's like I had all these projects that I could do before I had my manager, and we were at the APAP convention, and so I had a Duke Ellington project. I can do the music in New Orleans and such and blah blah blah. And this was 2001 or 2000, and a presenter in France, she's passing out the brochure I made up with all the things that I do, and they said, does he have a Louis Armstrong project? She said yes. I mean, I played on them, but I didn't really have one. I played trombone and tuba. The trumpet players would always lead. They said, well, if he has a Louis Armstrong, then we can book him next year in France. And that was the reason to do that project. And then, wow, so where am I going to hire to play trumpet? I knew most of Louis Armstrong solos, so I said, I'm going to play trumpet. And so then comes Hello Pops. And I think I still get some mileage out of that CD because I've done shows with my band, done shows with orchestras, I've done big band recordings of some of those arrangements that I did for that. So the recordings that I do now, I think more about what I didn't do when I first started recording was what concept, what is the concept of the record? I always kind of thought that way, but it's like, what do I want to do? Do I want to do, and I always want to record my own music because I have my own publishing company. So, what I didn't do 20 plus years ago, I would go to schools and colleges and universities and sometimes high schools and guest artists and play arrangements that were stock from Alfred or G. Sherman. I'm like, well, I arrange. Why am I playing everyone else's music? Do the All-State, Music Educators Association. I'm like, all right, how about I just play some of my arrangements and compositions? So that changed. I started thinking more about the business, publishing my tunes, publishing my arrangements of, you know, um, great tunes. And that's what I do now. So if I'm going to record, there's something in mind other than, oh, I just want to record a record. So last year I recorded in May a record of blues, let's see, rhythm, ballad, and blues is what I'm going to call it because it's all rhythm changes, all ballads and all blueses. So it's going to be rhythm, ballad, blues, rhythm, ballad, blues. And I think I put 2 or 3 arrangements, but the rest are all my original compositions. And, you know, my manager said, maybe you should call it something else. I'm like, no, rhythm, ballads, and blues. It's 12 tunes, and they're all in that order. Rhythm, ballad, different tempos, different keys. And once I finally, I was like, you know, and I didn't plan to go in the studio and do that, but I'm like, okay, because I had a few other tunes to consider. I said, oh, that tempo is slow enough. It's a ballad. I haven't released it yet, but so there's always a plan down the road in mind. And 20 years ago, I just said, yes, I'll do the gig. I'll do the gig. I'll do the gig. Now, you call me now. It's like, okay, what are we doing? Do you have a thing for the show? You want to do Duke Ellington? Okay. I have a few Duke Ellington arrangements. Oh, no, it's whatever you want to do. Okay, cool. Well, on my website, I have these 6. How much music do I need? Do I need to do the full program? You want to do the first half? I do the second half. I said, I'll pick some of my arrangements and compositions. So they purchased them and now they have them in their library. So instead of me playing Neil Hefti, which I love to do, I play Wycliffe Gordon. So that's one thing that I wasn't doing back then.
And and people probably don't realize, I mean, you write a lot of original compositions for all kinds of things too, right? I mean, you've done film scores, you've done things for orchestras. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I love it. I've written a couple of film scores for Oscar show films. My first premiere was in 2000, a film called Body and Soul. And I haven't released the audio recording, but I have released the DVD. So that's something that I'm working on. The other one I did was in 2011. It was called Within Our Gate. And I haven't released the DVD with the music, but I released the CD with the title of the CD is the overture that we play before the film begins. And it's called Within These Gates of Mine. And I also did music for another film that a small company did on a documentary about barbecue, Smokestack Lightning. I've also written choir, brass quintet, trombone ensembles, and I'm mostly known for jazz, but I've also arranged and I did an original composition for orchestra and choir. I think that was back in 2016. So, and all of it's not up on my website yet because publishing.
I was going to ask about the brass quintet arrangements because I saw some quartets, but I didn't see any quintets yet. But you have some that you've done.
I do. I just have to get them up. They've been cleaned up. You know, once I write it and work through it, and it's pretty much done. I just have to have my copies to go. I engrave music, but I pay a copies to make it pretty and publish it ready and get the information on. So that's something, you know, I don't do it. My manager does it. And a friend of mine that has Score Flipper where you can look at the score as it goes by. So yeah, there are a couple of brass quintet things. Matter of fact, I just did something with a brass quintet in Battle Creek, Michigan. We had we played one of my original compositions and an arrangement that I did a Basin Street, and both those are brass quintet with rhythm section. But I do have one called Snippets. That's brass. It's just brass quintet, 2 trumpets, French horn, trombone, and tuba.
Okay.
You know, no drums. And yeah, I'm looking forward to publishing it. I had some friends here in Augusta record it, and it's been years ago. And so it's a pretty good recording. We just got together in the studio at the university, and I'm like, the recording came out pretty good. I said, you know, I'm gonna put, sorry, you know, put this up on the website, and you know, I like it. it's a good medium to medium hard piece, but it's not extremely difficult. But it goes through some classical things, and also I have to listen to it again. Not really jazz, but the funny thing about that, I did it when I did band years ago, and I met a brass quintet. Then I met a trombone group quintet. So the guy called me and said, "We want to commission you to write a piece for us." I said, "Okay, cool." And I wrote a piece for trombone, 5 trombones, and I sent it to him and said, "I think you got us mixed up with another group. This is the brass quintet." I said, "Oh, this is not the trombone quintet." I met 2 groups that year. I said, "Give me 2 weeks." So, I just started writing like crazy. But yeah, I need to put that up on my website, but it's just very time consuming. So, but I look forward to it.
Well, you're a busy man. I mean, you do so many things, and I know you got a lot going on. So I just wanted to say, let's say maybe like 1 or 2 more questions. One would be, this is kind of a not such a great musical question, but you've seen everything. I mean, you've been around the world so much. You've toured so many places, and like me, I mean, I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. But where have you been that you could have never imagined when you were a kid?
And I could have never imagined.
Being like traveling to is in your life, like when a kid.
Well, Australia. It depends on what part of my life you're talking about. I started first time I joined my band in 1989. I went to Australia January 1990. I never, that was pretty amazing. But we went back the next year, and I've been times since. But gone to South Africa, and I've seen some crazy things. When I first went to Europe in 1989, the wall that stood between East and West Berlin, it must have been October, it was later on that year that wall came down. And that was my first time living in the United States. So we went on a tour in Europe, which consisted of a couple of cities in Italy, France, Germany. I don't think we went to Russia that year. But when we were in Germany, we were in West Berlin, and I remember going just to see some of the sights. I'm like, and, I went to Checkpoint Charlie. I was like, wow, this is crazy and cuckoo. But, I was there and pretty excited about going to places, playing music that I'd only read about in high school. And at that point, Europe was like, wow, man, it's exciting. But I was so happy to come back, home to the United States. And then in January of that year, we went to, 1990. We went to Australia, and I ever fun across the international date line. Going over there, we left on Sunday. We got there, it was Tuesday. And then coming back, we left on Monday, and we got back, it was still Monday. I was like, you lose time going over there and you gain time coming back, but it's like, wait a minute, we just left at 11, it's still 11. So anyway, it was great, the many travels, and recently in the past 4 or 5 years. My first time going to Australia, I never forget it. Went to Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane in Australia. And then we also went to New Zealand, Christchurch, and I can't think of the other city right now. But recently, in the past 5 years, I've gone to Mount Gambier, which is like Melbourne is the closest airport, and then there's another city you have to take a really small plane to get to, Mount Gambier.
Yeah.
Where James Morrison has his academy, his school, and it's near the South Sea. And it was beautiful being over there, seeing space and what I call country life, kind of like how I grew up, but the wildlife and the animal life was different with the koala and the kangaroo, and just learning the culture. And there was no language barrier, but in the history of it. So I think Australia, because of the long flight, was probably the most, flabbergasting to me. But then going, that next year going to Russia and seeing the Hermitage Museum, I was like, oh my goodness. And I'm not a big museum buff, but I was like, what, what, what? They say you can look, you can stand in front of everything having a museum for, even if it's just 15 seconds, you still wouldn't see everything in 3 days.
Yeah.
But anyway, some pretty amazing places and cultures. So
Well, and
it'd probably be easier for me to say.
well, and the last question is, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
When I get my 20-year-old self, make sure you're doing something that you love to do. And I think I was fortunate because even though everything wasn't always cool at, age 20, because you still, you do stupid things or uninformed things. Maybe some stupid things too. But make sure that you're just doing what you love. And to what I tell students now, if you're going to spend your time doing something, and I think about folks that go on vacation, and sometimes people ask me, when are you going to retire? I said, from this? When I stop breathing. I mean, traveling is kind of a drag. You're not traveling because of COVID has stopped. But I'm like, no, I would do this. I look forward to going to work. I look forward to writing music, composing, arranging, working with students, playing with people. I stopped playing for a living. I would just tell people, if you can help it, even before you get to 20, try to decide, find something that you love to do, that if you can get paid for it, that's great, but find something you would do for nothing. I'm like, I heard Slide Hampton say one time, he said, I really want to give you money back, but I can't. You're paying me to do this? So, and then it kind of developed into saying, you pay me to leave home, I'll play for free. So I would just tell my 20-year-old self to make sure you continue doing something that you love to do and that you look forward to doing. When people say, oh, gotta get up in the morning and go to work, I'm never like that. I don't care how early the flight is, I'm getting ready. I went to Texas to a private gig this past weekend, and everything was cool. We flew first class, everything was COVID conscious, they took temperatures, only 10 to 15 people at a private party. And man, just to play with musicians live again on the stage, we were spread out. We were social distance, but it was just so good, to do that again. And it's, we all love it, and we are riddled with having to figure this out through Zoom and Teams and making music the way we're doing it. But I think that I was very fortunate because I found my life's love at an early age, and I still love it. Traveling can be a drag, but playing music, interacting with other musicians, it's taken me so many places. I guess I can safely say it's kind of saved my life. Not that my life was in danger, but I wake up every day. I'm like, I'm glad I'm a musician. And I love it. So find something, make sure you're doing something that you love to do. So when you wake up in the morning, look forward to your job. Can't wait for vacation. Vacation? I don't know. I don't really know what that is. I imagine they're great. I feel like most of my life I'm on vacation because I get a chance to go and make music with some of the people. And I'm like, yeah. And sometimes it's better than others, but man, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Wycliffe, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and I appreciate the conversation. And I sure hope next time you're in Atlanta, we get to see each other in person.
Okay. Well, sure. I was just there yesterday. I was flying through though.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, yeah, hopefully we'll get some. You said you would be in Atlanta Symphony?
No. I'm just a freelancer in town.
Okay.
So
well, cool.
I say yes to everything.
Okay. Well, hopefully we get a chance
That,
to meet together once. Thanks for the interview.
hey, thank you very much, Wycliffe. I really appreciate the time.
All right, take care.
Great to see you. Be well. Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.